What is good, people? I hope you are all alright. I'm James and I'm an aspiring videographer, cinematographer, and in today's session I want to talk about slow motion. And do you need a camera with high frame rates to film slow motion, or can your editing software do it all? Now, just to give some context on this came back from a video I did in a previous time, or a previous video, and we spoke about a spec ad that I did for a beer commercial. A shot that I filmed was a slow motion shot of a can falling through the air. Now, no particular issues with it, but looking in hindsight back at it, it would have been nicer to have a camera, or should I say a shot, that was a little bit slower for the overall aesthetics. It would have, for me personally, looked a lot better. So that got me thinking about what could we have done in this scenario. Now, the obvious answer would be get a better camera, get something with higher frame rates. So me personally, I have a Canon R6. Now, at the time, I was dancing between that and a Sony a7S III. And the reason I wanted that was, obviously, you've heard about probably Sony a7S IIIs, and if you haven't, in the video space, especially from a prosumer point of view, it was a very sought after camera. But you do have at 1080p the option to have 240 frames per second, and in my head I thought that was going to be the answer. That would have been the answer in order to have solved my problems, which would have been able to slow that down by another 50% from where I was already at. Now, with this, I've since looked and had a think, and there is an option in DaVinci Resolve, and there'll be the option in other editing softwares, Final Cut, Adobe and the rest, which allow you to generate added frames from what you already have. So this is what the experiment is going to be today, is to go over the Optical Flow, which adds in frames for us, and hopefully it does a good enough job that we won't see the difference. Now, just to give some context, when we're doing slow motion, it's normally broken into two things that we need here, which is, first of all, it's the frame rate, and second of all, it is our shutter speed. And we're using the 180 rule for this, which is whatever our frame rate is, we would normally double. So whenever we're doing slow motion, this is, like I say, the rule of thumb. What we're going to do though, however, is we're going to max out our frame rate, but we will go through some ranges and I'll put them on screen in a moment. And what we will do instead is we will increase our shutter speed as if to say we are using that frame rate. And then we're going to try and generate them frames in DaVinci Resolve and see if that actually makes any difference at all. So with that being said, I think I will lay out some of the frame rates that I've decided to have a go at and understand, and have a little review and look and see if they actually are any good, are they workable, or is this just an absolutely silly idea that has no merit for anything at all. So that's the idea. So I'm going to put on screen right now, and we're going to just go through the parameters, if you like, for this experiment, and see so you've got an idea what frame rates we're going for. Now, I'm in England, so I'm going to be using PAL for this, but there's no reason why you can't use NTSC, which, for want of better words, is probably better. You're getting more frames or more money or bigger bang for your buck, as they say. So I'll put them on screen now. So what we've got here is we've got them in three parts. We've got the 25 frames per second, we've got the 50 frames per second, and the 100 frames per second. Then we've broken down into the shutter speed of 1/100, which is 50%, and then we've halved it again, or doubled the shutter speed again, which is 200 shutter speed at 25%. So we're going to try and see if that does anything. Now, just point out for that, guys, the 25 frames with a 1/200 would be equal to a 100 frames per second shot, if you like. So that is something what will be interesting to see. Now, most cameras do have a 50 or 60 frames per second, so this is why I definitely wanted to put this in. So we've got here 50 at 1/100, which is the standard 50% range anyway. So that's what we expect to see. And then we've tried to half it one more time at 200 frames and see if that's any better, and we can compare these after. And then, as you can see here, which is the one what I'm really wanting to look at, which is the 100 frames per second, we've got a 1/200, 1/400, 1/800, and 1/1600. So what we're going to do is we're going to put these on screen. And what we'll do is we'll start by just having a quick little look, especially from the 25 frames per second, and just have a bit of an idea as to what that's meant to look and what we do when we try and slow it down. Now, just for context here, guys, slow motion it's probably not going to be very good at the 25 frames per second. It's not meant to be slow motion, but I suppose it's just a good reference for us. And I think no matter how you want to look at it, the more frames you've got, the better. So everyone should have at least 25 frames per second in this, in their camera in order to do it, and that's why we've put that on. But fundamentally, the more frames per second you have, the more data it has in order to make better estimations for frame generation. Let's just start with the 25 frames per second. We've got the 1/50, 1/100 and 1/200, and we'll do them consecutively, and I'll put it in the corner so we can have a look at that. So let's just have a quick little look. And I mean, as a reference frame, we'll put more side by side here just so you get a bit of an idea of what we're trying to look at. Nothing too crazy, and I'm not trying to say that I expected anything more from this, but they're good reference frames in order to do it. I think we can safely say that the 25 frames per second is probably not an option within this. Maybe I could have done more. Maybe I could have done more shutter speed in order to really push it, but to be fair, it's something that I think if you've not even got 50 frames per second in your camera, I think it's probably a push at trying to do this. You could probably definitely slow it down a little bit, and you can get a little bit out of that, especially if like using 30 frames, you want to change it down to 80%. That's always a nice little look sometimes. It looks a bit dreamy, as they say. So what I want to do now is I want to move on to the 50 frames. I think this is where we're going to start really getting into the dirt or the crux of things, or maybe the devil's in the details. So let's go on to the 50 frames. Standard 50 frames per second with a 1/100, so you can see that. Okay, and yes, we expected that, I suppose. Nothing amazing. I'm going to put over the 1/200. So this is something what would be 100 frames per second. So let's just have a look at that. Yeah, what do you guys think? What do you guys think? I'm just looking at it. I'm not blown away by it. But then again, this is exactly what I had on the spec card when I did it, and this is something that I wanted to change anyway. So for me, I'm not seeing anything different, and I suppose I think looking back at this, actually, I would probably go back and film the 1/400 at 50 frames per second, because that would definitely give you guys an idea, if you've only got 50 frames or 60 frames, what you could push that to. But that might be something that you guys might be worth having a little play with yourself and seeing that. But let's get down to the brass tacks of this, which is the 1/200, which is the 100 frames per second. But in fact, you know what, we'll put these on screen. So if you can see, we've got the 1/200, 1/400, 1/800 and the 1/1600, which, guys, that'd be an 800 FPS on the top one, which is kind of crazy when I think about it. So first I'll put the standard one on. Let's just put the first standard one so you can see where I suppose a reference again, just to see what that is. Again, I've seen it. Let's put the 1/400 on. So this is something where the Sony a7S III would have been the camera of choice for me. Would this have made a difference? This is what I'm quite curious to see. So let's check this out. I'm going to be honest with you guys, that I expected more from it, and I'm quite glad in some respects, because I think if I'd have seen that, I'd have still been like, oh, I wish I'd have wanted that camera. So it just shows you, even we start doubling it and we weren't really wanting to really slow motion, or should I say, really slow something down, it's quite interesting to see what you actually need for this, because I thought that would have been enough. I mean, 240 frames, or 200 frames in this sense, I thought would have been enough. It doesn't seem to be that. So let's check the next one. I'll put the next one on. So the next one is 1/800. Do you know what? Actually, when I was seeing this isn't as bad as I thought. This isn't too bad, and it's starting to make me think that I'm quite surprised at what DaVinci could do. Now, when I first started doing this, I started playing around with it. I started using, you have the optical flow, and then underneath that you have something called, I believe it's speed warp. I can't remember. I might put a little snippet of it so you can see. I was using that and it was creating a lot of wobble. So all the way through, I thought, at the start of this experiment, I thought, oh my god, it's like, is it because I'm using a perfume bottle as it's falling, and maybe there's water in it and it can't generate the water. But in actual fact, what I actually needed to do was purely use the enhanced drop down, if you like, to use the enhanced drop down, which whatever it's trying to do is obviously a little bit different. I made an assumption that the speed warp, which is at the bottom end of the drop down menu, with it being like the highest, so I think it starts with better, enhanced, and then speed warp, would be the best of the lot. And in this case it wasn't, it was the enhanced. And as you can see, it's holding up pretty well, but the issues are a lot at the top and the bottom of the frame. But then again, in my spec ad, I didn't use it, I didn't use the bottle coming, or should I say the can coming from the top of the screen to the bottom, or did I? Got me thinking now. I'll have to have a look at that. But my point is, we could have clipped that anyway and just used the bit that we needed if it was slow motion. So right, let's go to the one I'm really interested to see then, which is the 1/1600. So I've slowed this down considerably just to see what this is like, and let's have a look. Do you know what, guys? That is absolutely insane. I cannot believe how good that is. Again, 90% of the frame is not all there when we're talking about the entry and the exit of the bottle. But again, if we can clip that, I mean, it's suspended in air for that long. I'm genuinely blown away at that. I did not expect it to be as good as what it was, especially how it started, like I say, with the whole warping of the image when I was using speed warp. So Optical Flow and Enhanced is definitely something that can get you out of a pinch. Now guys, just remember, the more frame rate you want to boost up, you're going to need a lot more light to get onto the subject or the item or whatever you're trying to film, because it has limitations, is what I'm trying to say. But this is definitely a viable option. It's definitely something that if you have got limitations with your camera or things like that, it's potentially something you could do to get a desired effect. Now, as a summary to all this, I suppose, is it something that you're going to be using all the time? No, I don't think it is. Similar to if we're using things like the spec ad, that was one frame in so many. It wasn't something where I particularly used something what was so specific, where we've seen these super slow motion, really clean and crisp shots. I don't know if it would be as good as that. Now again, this was at 1080p at 100 frames per second. Whether 4K makes any more of a difference is definitely something to check or try. If you've got something like that, might be very interesting to do. But I think all in all, for me, I find it quite a resounding success. And I think, given the outcome here, the question for me is, would I have used it if I know that this is a tool, or if I thought quick enough on my feet to use this? And the answer for me is yes. I think I definitely would have used it. Now, I just want to caveat again something here. I chucked fruit up at the same time. So I had fruit and I put them both together, and we had, or I had, should I say, the can falling with the fruit. Now, I don't know how that would affect it with multiple things in the frame falling down, but I mean, looking at it, I can't see why it would be so much of an issue. And I think that's pretty cool to think that DaVinci Resolve, and I'm guessing the other editing softwares will be exactly the same. How far technology has come right now in order to do this is absolutely incredible. And again, guys, this is just an experiment. It's nothing scientific, but it just goes to show you that by playing around with things, what you can learn about your camera. And this is something when we talk about, or should I say, I talk about when I'm learning and things like that. It's all good watching things, but just getting out and doing stuff is an eye-opening experience. Can you replicate what you see on the screen? And this is something that I just thought I'd give a go, and I've not really seen anyone talk about it. So I would say that this is definitely something you can do. Just by increasing your shutter speed, you can actually add frames in, and it can work. You can get a bit of a cheaper version of a slow motion. I suppose I'd like to know what you think with regards to the outcome. Do you think it's something you would use? Is it something you wouldn't use? Is there anything that you thought was anything that could have been better? Is there anything we could have done differently in the experiment? I think if I would have done it again, I definitely would have used the 50 frames per second and tried to maybe double or maybe even quadruple it again, just to see if a 50 frame per second could do exactly the same as the 100. But yeah guys, that were pretty cool, quite interesting stuff, and it just goes to show you what we can do with modern technology. So yeah guys, I've got a few more experiments coming through just because I'm just a bit curious to see, and it's always interesting to know these kind of things. So if you stop while the end, massive thank you for that, and hopefully I will get to see you in the next one. Alright guys, so take it easy, I'll catch you in a bit.